A cowboy spotted an Apache woman washing by the river, and her torn dress stopped him cold. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the endless plains. The air was dry and carried the faint scent of dust and sagebrush. A lone cowboy rode slowly, his horse plodding through the tall waving grass. He had been on the trail since early morning, leaving behind the small town where he had spent a few quiet days resting. The trail had been long and lonely, stretching over hills and valleys, through dusty roads and narrow paths that seemed to disappear into the horizon. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but the sweat still dampened the collar of his shirt. He wiped it away with a rough hand, feeling the grit of the day settle on his skin. The cowboy's horse, a sturdy chestnut, stepped carefully as they moved toward a low ridge. Ahead, the land opened up to reveal a narrow river, its surface sparkling under the afternoon sun. It was a rare sight. Water was not easy to find in these parts. He reined in his horse and allowed it to lower its head to take a sip. The sound of water flowing gently over smooth stones was almost musical in the quiet wilderness. The cowboy felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had been riding for hours, searching not just for water, but for a place to rest, even for a little while. As he sat on his horse, surveying the river, he noticed a figure on the opposite bank. At first he thought it might be another traveler, but as he looked more closely, he realized it was a woman. She was kneeling by the edge of the water, her hands busy with some task he could not yet see clearly. Her movements were calm and careful, almost like a dance as she worked. The sun caught the strands of her dark hair, making them shimmer with a soft glow. She seemed completely absorbed in what she was doing, unaware of his presence. The cowboy squinted, trying to make out the details. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed her clothing. Her dress was torn, frayed along the edges, and had hung loosely over her small frame. It had clearly been damaged, possibly from travel or from brushing through the rough terrain. The sight of her in that condition stopped him for a moment. It was not just the torn fabric. It was the way she carried herself despite it. There was a quiet strength in her posture, a resilience that drew his attention. He shifted slightly in his saddle, careful not to startle her. He had learned over the years that approaching strangers, especially women traveling alone, required caution. Not everyone in these parts was friendly, and the frontier could be unforgiving. Yet he felt a strange pull, a mix of curiosity and concern. He wanted to know her story, to understand who she was and why she was here, alone by the river. The woman dipped her hands into the cool water, scrubbing carefully at a piece of cloth. He could see the determination in her movements, the way she bent over the task with quiet focus. Her hands moved with skill and precision, even as they got wet and muddy. He noticed the sunlight reflecting off the water, creating tiny flickers of light that danced across her face. Her expression was calm, but there was a hint of weariness in her eyes, the kind that comes from traveling long distances or facing hardships. For a moment he simply watched. The river was calm, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the sound of flowing water was soothing. He could see birds flitting along the banks, small creatures moving carefully through the grass. It was a peaceful scene, almost like a painting, but the presence of the woman made it feel alive. There was a story here, one that he could sense but not yet understand. As he observed, he thought about the many travelers he had seen over the years. People moving from one place to another, carrying with them their hopes, fears, and burdens. Some he had met and helped, others had passed by without a word. But this woman was different. She seemed so self-reliant, so determined to handle everything on her own. Yet the torn dress and the careful way she washed the clothes told him she had faced difficulties. He could imagine the challenges of traveling through the wilderness, of finding food and water, of staying safe from the dangers that lurked in the vast plains. He noticed small details, the way the sunlight highlighted the contours of her face, the way her hair fell over her shoulders, the faint lines of concentration on her forehead. There was something almost mesmerizing about the way she worked, as if she were part of the river and the trees, a natural element of the landscape. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and respect. She was not just a traveler. She was someone who had endured hardships and continued moving forward, someone who carried her strength quietly but unmistakably. The cowboy shifted again, trying to decide what to do. Should he approach her, or would that be rude? He had learned that sometimes it was best to observe from a distance, to let people have their space. Yet, he could not shake the feeling that she might need help, even if she did not ask for it. The torn dress was more than just fabric. It was a sign that life had not been easy for her. He remembered times when he himself had been worn down, tired, and in need of assistance, and he wondered if she had experienced the same struggles. He thought about his own journey. He had been riding alone for days, facing the harsh sun, rough terrain, and the solitude that came with life on the trail. He knew the value of water, of rest, of a friendly face in a lonely place. Seeing her by the river stirred a sense of connection, a recognition of shared humanity. She was someone living her life in the same wild land, facing the same challenges even if their paths had been very different. The woman paused in her work, leaning back slightly to stretch. The sunlight caught her face, revealing a calm yet determined expression. She seemed aware of the world around her, alert to sounds and movements, yet fully engaged in her task. The cowboy noticed the careful way she moved, the way she balanced on the uneven riverbank. It was clear she had spent time outdoors, navigating difficult terrain, and had learned how to survive in the wilderness. He continued to watch, feeling a mix of respect and curiosity. He wondered about her story, where she had come from, where she was going, and what had brought her to this quiet river in the middle of the plains. He imagined the challenges she had faced, traveling long distances alone, finding food and water, protecting herself from danger. The torn dress, once a simple piece of clothing, now seemed like a symbol of endurance, a testament to her strength and resilience. The cowboy adjusted his position, keeping a careful distance as he observed. He could feel the horse shift beneath him, sensing his own tension. The air was still, the only sounds coming from the river and the gentle rustling of leaves. He realized that moments like this were rare, the chance to witness someone's quiet determination, to see a life lived in harmony with the land, even if only for a short time. As the sun continued its slow descent, casting long shadows across the plains, he knew that this encounter would stay with him. The image of the woman, her torn dress, and the calm river would remain in his mind long after he rode away. It was a reminder that the world was full of people with stories to tell, people whose lives intersected with his in fleeting but meaningful ways. He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun and the coolness of the river air. For a few moments he allowed himself to simply be present, to watch, to listen, and to appreciate the quiet beauty of the scene before him. The plain stretched endlessly in all directions, but here, by the river, there was a sense of peace, a rare moment of connection in a vast and often unforgiving land. The cowboy knew that soon he would have to move on, to continue his journey across the plains. But for now he stayed, observing the woman at the river, letting her presence settle into his mind and heart. He felt a sense of gratitude for this brief encounter, for the chance to witness resilience, determination, and quiet strength. The torn dress, the flowing water, and the warm sunlight had combined to create a scene that would remain with him forever. A story of survival, courage, and the simple beauty of life lived close to the land. As he prepared to move on, he took one last look at the river and the woman. She seemed unaware of his gaze, fully absorbed in her task, yet he felt a connection that transcended words. It was a silent acknowledgement of shared experience, a recognition of strength in the face of hardship. With a final nod to the scene, he urged his horse forward, carrying with him the memory of the river, the woman, and the quiet power of resilience that had stopped him cold that afternoon. The cowboy lingered on the riverbank, leaning lightly against his horse. He couldn't take his eyes off the woman, though he remained careful to keep a respectful distance. Something about her held his attention. It wasn't just the way her torn dress clung to her or the sunlight glinting on her hair. It was the calm determination in her movements, the quiet way she faced her world without complaint. He had seen people struggle, people who shouted or cried when things went wrong. But she seemed almost untouchable, steady even when life had clearly tested her. He watched as she bent over the water again, dipping her hands into the cool river, scrubbing at the clothes with a precision that spoke of habit and patience. Her fingers were nimble and strong, but there was a tenderness in the way she handled each garment. It was clear that she took pride in even small tasks, a sign that she had grown up learning to care for herself and those around her. The cowboy felt a flicker of admiration mixed with a subtle concern. How had she ended up here, alone, in this wide, empty land? He had been on the trail for a long time, traveling through the vast plains with only his horse for company. He had grown used to solitude, but seeing her here stirred something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of curiosity and human connection. He knew the dangers of approaching strangers, especially someone from a tribe he had only met at a distance or in tense situations. Yet, he couldn't ignore the pull to learn her story, to understand who she was. The woman paused again, lifting her gaze briefly to the horizon. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the land as if she were reading it for signs of danger or opportunity. Then she looked directly at the cowboy. For a moment their eyes met across the river. He noticed the wary caution in her gaze, a careful assessment that spoke of someone used to navigating a world that was often unforgiving. She was not afraid exactly, but alert, ready for anything. The cowboy tipped his hat slightly in a gesture of respect. She returned the nod, and though there was no smile, there was a sense of acknowledgement, a silent recognition that he meant no harm. He shifted slightly, urging his horse to take a few steps closer, careful not to startle her. The soft crunch of hooves against the sandy bank carried across the quiet river, and the woman's hands paused for a moment. She watched him, her head tilted slightly, as if measuring his intentions. The cowboy slowed his approach, speaking in a calm, even tone. "You all right?" he called gently, his voice carrying just enough to reach her without seeming aggressive. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but then relaxed. She answered in a low voice, steady and measured. "I'm fine. Just finishing my chores." Her accent was soft, her words deliberate. The cowboy felt a small relief. She was not hostile, not fleeing, not in danger from him. She was simply a traveler, managing her own life in this vast and lonely land. He nodded, staying on his horse for a moment, unsure if he should dismount. There was a tension between them, not one of fear but of careful respect. The frontier had taught him that encounters like this required patience. One wrong move, and trust could be lost before it was even built. He decided to take a small step forward. "That dress, it's torn." "Did it happen on the trail?" he asked, trying to sound casual but with genuine concern. The woman glanced down at her dress, then back at him. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "It got caught on some rocks." Nothing serious. Her tone was calm, but the cowboy could sense a hint of resilience in her words. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help. She simply stated a fact. That simple statement told him more than words could. She had learned to adapt, to keep moving forward despite obstacles. The cowboy nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of respect and curiosity. He had seen many travelers in his time, men and women, settlers, traders, but few carried themselves with such quiet strength. There was a difference between survival and resilience, he thought, and she embodied both. He wondered what her journey had been like, what road she had traveled, what dangers she had faced, and how she had learned to rely only on herself. The woman bent over the river again, resuming her task. The cowboy continued to watch, noticing small details he might otherwise have missed. Her hands were skilled, moving in a rhythm that suggested years of practice. The sunlight danced on the water, casting fleeting reflections across her face. There was a certain beauty in the simplicity of the moment. The work, the river, the quiet connection forming between them. As he observed, the cowboy's mind wandered to his own life on the trail. He had spent long days riding, facing heat, storms, and the occasional encounter with danger. He had experienced solitude in a way that few others could understand. And yet, watching her, he realized how rare it was to see someone facing the world with such composed determination. It reminded him that strength came in many forms, sometimes loud and obvious, sometimes quiet and unseen. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of the river and the faint aroma of wildflowers. Birds flitted along the banks, hopping from branch to branch, and the soft splash of the woman's movements echoed gently through the air. The cowboy felt a strange sense of calm, a temporary reprieve from the harshness of life on the plains. For a moment he could forget the dust, the heat, the loneliness. Here there was life, movement, and a quiet connection that transcended words. He noticed the way her dress clung in some places and hung loosely in others, evidence of both wear and careful adjustment. Despite its torn edges, it did not diminish her dignity or composure. She moved with grace, bending and stretching without hesitation, as if she had long ago learned to navigate challenges without complaint. The cowboy felt a flicker of admiration. She had faced hardship and continued on, just as he had in his own way. Time passed quietly. He remained on his horse, observing, listening, and learning without needing to speak. The woman dipped her hands into the water again, rinsing the fabric, her movements methodical and precise. Each motion told a story, of care, of experience, of someone who understood the importance of even small tasks in the larger scheme of survival. He realized that in a way they were both travelers, moving through life with caution and awareness, each carrying their own burdens and skills. The river reflected the sunlight, creating a shimmering path across the water. The cowboy found himself drawn into the rhythm of the scene, the flow of water, the sway of the trees, the careful movements of the woman. It was a rare kind of beauty, one that required attention and patience to fully appreciate. He felt grateful for the chance to witness it, to be present in a moment that might otherwise have passed unnoticed. Eventually, he decided to take another small step closer, his horse moving slowly over the soft earth. He spoke again, this time in a softer tone. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to make sure you're safe." His words were simple, but they carried honesty and concern. The woman paused, looking up at him with steady eyes. She studied him for a moment, weighing his intentions, then nodded slightly. "I'm safe."
"Thank you," she said. There was no warmth in her voice, no need for it, just clear acknowledgement.
That was enough for the cowboy. He felt a sense of relief and respect, understanding that trust was not given lightly in this land. For the next hour, he remained nearby, observing without interrupting. The woman worked, washed, and adjusted her torn dress with care. He noticed the small acts that revealed her character, the way she smoothed the fabric, the careful handling of the water, the quiet focus on each task. It was a display of patience and resilience that spoke volumes without a single word. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the plains, the cowboy realized that he had learned something valuable simply by watching. Strength and resilience were often quiet, understated, and personal. He had seen it in many forms over the years, but rarely as plainly as in her presence. There was no pretense, no need for attention, just the steady, enduring force of someone who had faced the challenges of life head-on. Finally, he shifted in his saddle, sensing that the moment was drawing to a natural close. The woman glanced up again, meeting his gaze briefly. It was a silent acknowledgement, a small connection that did not require words. He tipped his hat once more and began to prepare to move on, knowing that the image of her at the river, working calmly and carefully, would remain in his memory for a long time. Even as he started to ride slowly along the bank, keeping a respectful distance, he knew that this encounter was not just another passing moment on the trail. It was a reminder of the strength, resilience, and quiet courage that people carried with them, often unnoticed, through the vast and often harsh landscape of the frontier. The river, the sunlight, and the woman's calm determination had created a scene that would stay with him, shaping the way he saw the world and the people who inhabited it. He paused one last time to take in the scene, letting the memory settle in his mind. The river flowed gently, the trees swayed in the breeze, and the woman continued her work, unaware of the impact she had on a lone traveler who had stumbled upon her by chance. In that quiet moment, the cowboy understood that the frontier was not only a place of challenge and danger, it was also a place of subtle beauty, connection, and resilience, where even the briefest encounters could leave a lasting mark on the heart. The cowboy had been watching the woman for some time, the quiet rhythm of her work and the soft flow of the river pulling him into a strange mix of curiosity and concern. He had remained at a distance, respectful, letting her have her space. But now, as the afternoon sun leaned lower in the sky, painting the plains in warm golds and reds, he felt a pull he could not ignore. He wanted to approach, to speak, to see if he could offer help, or at least learn her story. He adjusted his horse, feeling the familiar weight of the saddle beneath him. His hand rested lightly on the reins, careful not to spook the animal. And he spoke softly to it, urging it to stay calm. Horses, like people, sensed tension. He had learned over the years that patience and calmness were essential when approaching someone unfamiliar, especially in the open plains. The woman at the river was alone, and her body language told him she was alert, ready for any sudden danger. He had to be cautious. Taking a deep breath, he began to move slowly closer, making sure his horse's steps were quiet on the sandy riverbank. He raised his hand slightly in a gesture of peace, tipping his hat to show he meant no harm.
"I hope I'm not intruding," he called softly. "I just wanted to see if you're all right." The woman paused her work, her hands resting on the wet cloth as she looked up.
Her eyes met his, sharp and assessing. He could feel the tension in the air, a delicate balance between caution and curiosity. She didn't move toward him or away, simply held her ground, watching him as he continued to approach. The cowboy noticed the slight narrowing of her eyes, the careful way she shifted her weight, ready to respond if needed. He understood. In these parts, caution was survival. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady, calm, and measured. "Thank you for asking." Her words were polite but distant. She gave no invitation to come closer, no hint of friendliness, just the clear statement that she was safe and self-sufficient. The cowboy nodded, appreciating the honesty in her response. It told him that she was someone used to handling her life, someone who had learned to rely on herself above all else. He stopped a few paces away, easing his horse to a halt. The sound of its hooves against the soft riverbank blended with the gentle rush of water and the distant chirping of birds. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment, the quiet tension between them, the unspoken questions, the curiosity on both sides. Finally, he spoke again, keeping his tone calm and neutral. "That dress, it's torn. Did it happen on the trail?" The woman looked down at the fabric, then back at him. She gave a small shrug. "It caught on some rocks. Nothing serious." There was no complaint in her tone, no dramatics, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. The cowboy felt a small flicker of respect. Many people might have been frustrated or embarrassed by the tear, but she had taken it in stride, simply dealing with the problem and moving on. It was the same quiet resilience he had noticed since he first saw her. The cowboy felt a gentle warmth of admiration, mixed with a sense of human connection. There was a story here, he knew, one that he could sense but not yet hear. He had learned over the years that people who endured hardships quietly often had the most remarkable stories, ones of courage, determination, and survival. He wanted to hear hers. He dismounted slowly, keeping one hand on his horse's reins, careful not to startle either the animal or the woman. "I don't mean to bother you," he said, taking a careful step closer. "I've been traveling these plains a long time, and it's rare to see someone working here by the river." It caught my attention. His voice was calm, respectful, and patient, giving her space to respond however she wished. For a moment she said nothing. She simply studied him, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and caution. Then she spoke, her voice steady, though slightly softer than before. "It is rare to see travelers stopping without reason. Most are just passing through, looking only for water or shelter."
"You're different." Her words were simple but carried meaning.
She had noticed his presence, his care, and his patience. He was not rushing her or invading her space. That awareness seemed to make her consider him differently. The cowboy nodded. "I like to take my time," he said with a small, almost shy smile. "Sometimes it's worth slowing down and noticing the world around us. And sometimes it's worth making sure people are safe, especially when they're alone in the wilderness." She tilted her head slightly, considering him.
You are polite.
she said finally. Most people would just ride past. They would not ask. There was no accusation in her tone, only observation. It struck the cowboy as truthful, and he felt a sense of quiet pride. He had always tried to live by respect and caution, even when the trail made it easier to ignore others. The river flowed gently between them, carrying leaves and small branches downstream. The sun reflected off the water, creating tiny flashes of gold and silver that danced across her face. The cowboy noticed the delicate rhythm of her movements as she resumed washing her clothes. Each motion was careful and precise, a display of skill and patience that spoke of experience. She did not rush even though the work was difficult. He realized that patience, skill, and resilience were qualities she carried naturally, qualities that had likely helped her survive the challenges of the frontier. "You travel alone?" he asked after a moment of silence, his voice quiet, as if he did not want to disturb the calm of the river. The woman glanced up at him briefly, then back at her work. "Yes, I prefer it that way." Her voice was calm, not defensive, but firm. "It is easier to move, to survive. Company can be a distraction, sometimes even a danger."
The cowboy nodded slowly.
He understood completely. Traveling alone had its risks, but it also gave freedom. The freedom to make decisions, to move at your own pace, to watch and learn without interference. He had done it many times himself, and he could see why she preferred it. There was a pause, filled only with the sounds of the river and the occasional call of a distant bird. The cowboy watched as she wrung out a piece of cloth, her hands steady and practiced. Each fold, each motion, seemed purposeful. He felt a mixture of admiration and humility. Here was someone who had lived a life filled with hardship, and had learned to meet it with calm, methodical action rather than complaint. It was a lesson he appreciated more than he could say. Finally, he decided to take another small step closer, careful not to close the space between them too quickly. "My name is Eli," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I didn't mean to disturb you."
I just thought it might be nice to speak. Sometimes it's good to share stories.
The woman looked at him, her dark eyes observing his face. After a moment, she nodded slightly. "I am Ayita," she said. Her tone was soft but firm. "Sharing stories can be good, but only if the story is true." She returned to her work, her words simple, honest, and deliberate. Eli felt a quiet smile tug at the corner of his lips. "Stories are always better when they are true," he said. He dismounted fully, keeping his horse close, and sat down on a smooth stone near the riverbank. He did not move closer than necessary, showing respect for her space, yet signaling that he wished to converse. For several minutes, neither spoke. The river flowed gently between them, carrying small ripples downstream. The sun continued its slow descent, casting long shadows across the plains and turning the water into a ribbon of molten gold. The cowboy felt the moment stretch, a quiet connection forming between two travelers who had crossed paths by chance. Ayita finally spoke, her voice calm, reflective. "You ask many questions. Are you curious or concerned?" There was no judgment, only inquiry. Eli thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Both, I suppose. Curiosity. 'Cause it is rare to see someone working like this, surviving alone. Concern. Because the world can be harsh, and I wanted to make sure you were safe." He paused, letting his words settle. It is easy to pass by, but sometimes noticing makes a difference. Ayita nodded slowly, as if considering his honesty. "The world is harsh," she agreed. "But noticing, yes, that can make a difference." She glanced at him briefly, then back at the water. "You are different. I can see it. Most men do not stop to notice. They only pass." Eli smiled softly, feeling a warmth of understanding. "Perhaps it is because I've learned the value of connection," he said. "Even brief ones. Even quiet ones. You never know when a single moment can change how you see the world, or how the world sees you." For the first time, Ayita allowed a small smile, fleeting but genuine. It was not one of affection, but of acknowledgement. Two people from very different worlds had paused their journeys long enough to recognize each other, to share a moment of understanding, however brief. The sun sank lower, and the temperature began to drop slightly. Eli glanced at his horse, then back at Aita. The night will be coming soon. "Do you have a safe place to stay?" he asked carefully. Aita shook her head. "Not yet. I will make camp near the river. It is safe here. Animals and men are far, mostly." She looked at him, her expression steady.
"And you, where will you go tonight?" "I'll ride on. A few more miles," Eli said.
"But I can make sure you have water and firewood if you like. It is no trouble." Aita considered his offer. After a long moment, she nodded. "That would be helpful. Thank you." For the first time, a bridge of trust had begun to form. Two strangers, cautious and wary, were beginning to see that sometimes survival meant allowing another human to help, even just a little. The river, the sunlight, and the quiet beauty of the plains had created the perfect setting for this delicate understanding. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli and Aita sat together by the riverbank, sharing small words and simple gestures, each learning from the other. The cowboy had approached, carefully, respectfully, and in return a bond, fragile yet real, had begun to form. As the sun dipped further toward the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, Eli and Aita sat together by the riverbank. The gentle flow of water created a calm, rhythmic backdrop for their conversation, and the world around them seemed to soften in the fading light. For a long moment, neither spoke. Both were aware of the fragile trust forming between them. Words were not needed immediately. The quiet of the plains carried more meaning than any sentence could. Eli watched Aita work on her laundry, folding and smoothing the cloth with practiced hands. "You move through life carefully," he said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was calm, almost reflective. "I can see it in the way you handle your work, even small things like washing clothes. It shows strength." Aita paused, her dark eyes glinting in the fading sunlight. "Strength is necessary," she replied softly. "The world, it does not wait. It takes from those who are careless. I have learned to be careful, to plan, to act with purpose." She spoke quietly, but there was a weight to her words. Eli could tell that her life had not been easy, and yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. He nodded, understanding completely. "I know that feeling," he said. "Out here, every day is a test. You never know when a storm might hit, when water might run dry, or when danger might appear around the bend. You've got to be ready for everything, and still keep moving forward." Aita glanced at him, curious. "And have you always been ready? Have you always survived?" she asked. There was no judgment in her question, only curiosity. Eli smiled faintly, thinking back over his years on the trail. "Not always," he admitted. "There were times I was tired, hungry, or just alone. But I learned to survive. I learned to notice the land, the people, and the small signs that tell you what's coming. You learn patience, and sometimes a little luck helps too." Aita nodded slowly, folding a piece of cloth with care. "Luck is useful," she said, "but skill and knowledge are more important. You have to understand the land, know when to move, when to wait. Only then can you survive." Her words carried the wisdom of experience. Eli could see that every action she had taken that day, the careful washing, the steady movements, the calm demeanor, was guided by the same understanding. For a while they sat quietly, watching the river. The water reflected the last light of the day, turning shades of gold and rose. Birds chirped their evening songs, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt suspended in time. Eli realized that this was rare in his life. Rare to meet someone who shared such a quiet understanding of the world, someone who had faced hardship and emerged stronger, more aware, and more resilient. Finally, Eli spoke again. "Tell me about your journey," he said softly. "Where have you come from?" How did you find yourself here by this river all alone? Aita looked at him, her gaze steady. She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing how much to share. Then she spoke, her voice calm and deliberate. I travel with purpose, she said. My people, my family. They have taught me to move carefully, to respect the land, and to survive. I had to leave my village because the journey was necessary for learning, for understanding the world beyond the place where I was born. Eli listened closely, feeling the weight of her words. He could sense that her journey had not been easy, that it had required courage, determination, and endurance. It must have been difficult traveling alone, he said gently. Especially through these plains, you face storms, animals, and the loneliness. Aita nodded. It is not easy, she admitted, but it is necessary. I have learned to trust my own judgment, to notice the small things, the river, the trees, the sky. They tell you where to go, when to rest, when to move. That knowledge, it is more valuable than any companion. But sometimes, when the night is long and quiet, you wish for someone to share it with. Eli felt a pang of understanding. He had spent countless nights under the stars, alone on the trail, feeling the cold bite at his bones and the loneliness stretch into the endless plains. He had rarely found someone to share those moments with, someone who could understand the quiet struggles of life in the wilderness. And here, by this river, he had found that connection. Brief, fragile, but real. He spoke softly. I know that feeling, he said. There are times when the world feels too wide, too empty. You wonder if anyone else knows what you've faced, what you've survived. But sometimes you meet someone who understands, even if only a little. And that makes the journey lighter, at least for a moment. Aita's eyes softened slightly, and she looked at him with a new kind of recognition. Yes, she said quietly. Even a moment can matter. They fell into a companionable silence, listening to the river, watching the sun sink lower, and feeling the quiet connection growing between them. Eli noticed the small details, the way her hands moved with care, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, the calm strength she carried in her posture. Each observation told him more about her life, her resilience, and her understanding of the world. After a while, Aita spoke again. And you? She asked. You said you have traveled long. Tell me about your life on the trail. How have you survived? Eli leaned back on the stone, thinking carefully. I've learned many things, he said. The land teaches you patience. The animals teach you caution. People teach you trust, but only after it is earned. You learn to ride fast when danger comes, to be calm when it passes. You learn that life is about noticing, observing, and making the right choice at the right time. And sometimes, it is about helping someone else when they need it, even if you don't know them well. Aita nodded thoughtfully. Helping others, that is rare. Most people think only of themselves. But you see more than yourself. Eli shrugged slightly, smiling. I've made my share of mistakes, he said. But I've also learned that when you do something for another person, even small, it can matter more than you realize. Sometimes it changes them. Sometimes it changes you. Aita considered this, then returned to her work, her hands folding and adjusting the cloth carefully. I see now, she said softly. Even small acts, they can make a difference. You have shown me that today, simply by noticing. The cowboy felt a warmth in his chest. It was rare to meet someone who understood the subtleties of life, someone who recognized that even small gestures, even small moments, could hold significance. He realized that this connection, fragile as it was, had already begun to leave its mark on him. The sun finally disappeared below the horizon, leaving a soft glow in the sky. The river reflected the changing colors, now deepening into blues and purples. Night was coming, bringing with it the coolness of the plains and the distant sounds of wildlife preparing for darkness. Eli glanced at Aida, noticing the calm confidence in her posture. She had survived long before he arrived, and she would survive long after. Yet here, in this shared moment, there was something mutual. Two travelers, two lives intersecting briefly, each learning from the other. Eli spoke gently, breaking the quiet. "It will get cold soon," he said. "Do you have a place to stay or a fire for warmth?" Aida shook her head. "I will make a small camp nearby. It is safe enough." "But, thank you for asking." Eli nodded. "I can help," he offered. "Just a little fire, some wood. Nothing more. It will make the night easier." Aida considered his offer. There was a pause, a long, deliberate silence as she weighed the gesture. Finally, she nodded slightly. "Then, thank you. It would be helpful." Together, they gathered a few small logs and branches, careful not to disturb the riverbank. Eli struck a flint, creating sparks that slowly caught on the dry wood. The fire flickered to life, casting soft light on their faces and reflecting in the water. Aida arranged her things near the edge, her movements deliberate and calm. The warmth of the fire provided comfort, but it was also a symbol, a small bridge of trust forming between two people from very different worlds. As the night settled, Ellie and Aida began to speak again, sharing small stories of their journeys, of the land, of people they had met along the way. Each story revealed more about their lives, their struggles, and their resilience. There were no grand tales of heroism or adventure, only the simple, honest accounts of survival, of learning, and of human connection. And yet, in those simple stories, there was beauty, understanding, and respect. By the time the stars appeared in the sky, Eli and Aida had learned more about each other than either had expected. They shared laughter, small moments of surprise, and quiet reflections on the vastness of the plains and the challenges it held. The cowboy realized that this meeting was not merely chance. It was a lesson, a reminder that even in the wild, there was space for trust, understanding. And as the fire crackled and the river flowed gently beside them, the bond between Eli and Aida deepened, a fragile but real connection that would carry forward into the days to come, guiding their journeys and reminding them both that even in the harshest of landscapes, moments of kindness, respect, and shared stories could light the darkest nights. The night deepened over the plains, the sky a vast canvas of stars twinkling silently above. The fire crackled softly between Ellie and Aida, its warmth contrasting with the cool air settling over the riverbank. The quiet hum of the river blended with the distant calls of nocturnal birds and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. For a while, neither spoke. The moments they had shared that day seemed to hold them in a quiet, reflective pause. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing the two travelers to absorb everything they had experienced together. Eli watched Aida as she adjusted her small bundle of belongings beside her. She moved with the same calm precision he had observed all day, folding and arranging with care, making her temporary space comfortable and safe. Her torn dress, now patched and clean, bore the marks of the day's work, yet she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that had first caught his attention. He realized that the dress, which had once seemed vulnerable, had become a symbol, not of weakness, but of strength, resilience, and endurance. The cowboy spoke softly, breaking the silence. "The night will be cold," he said. "I'll ride on soon, but I want to make sure you're prepared." His words were simple, but they carried genuine concern. He could feel the weight of responsibility, not in a commanding way, but as a reflection of the quiet connection they had built over the day. Aida looked at him, her dark eyes calm but observant. "I will be fine," she said, her voice steady. "The fire will keep me warm, and the river provides water. I have learned to be careful, even alone." There was no arrogance in her words, only honesty. Eli could sense that her confidence came from experience, from a lifetime of facing challenges with thoughtfulness and patience. He nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You have a remarkable way of handling life," he said. "I've met many people out here, but few have your patience and skill. It is inspiring." Aida's gaze softened slightly, and she gave a small nod in acknowledgement. "You are kind to notice," she said quietly. Most do not. Most ride past without seeing. Her words were simple, yet they carried a depth of meaning. Eli realized that noticing someone, truly noticing them, was a rare and valuable act, especially in the vastness of the plains where survival often demanded focus and speed. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the firelight dance on the water and the shadows stretch across the riverbank. Eli's mind wandered, reflecting on the day's events, the chance sighting of Ayita at the river, the quiet observation that had led to cautious conversation, and the stories they had shared by the fire. Each moment had been small on its own, yet together they formed a tapestry of connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Finally, Eli spoke again. "I will be leaving soon," he said softly. "The trail calls me onward. But I wanted you to know. Meeting you has made this journey different. Better. Your strength, your calm, it has reminded me of what is important." Aita looked at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, she gave a small smile. "And meeting you has reminded me," she said, "that not all strangers are dangerous. Some can be kind, even when the world is harsh." There was a quiet dignity in her tone, a recognition of the rare bond they had formed. Eli stood, brushing the dust from his trousers and adjusting his hat. He walked to his horse, patting its neck gently before mounting. He felt a sense of finality in the moment, a delicate balance between continuing his journey and honoring the connection he had formed. Yet he could not help but linger, taking in the sight of Ayita by the fire, her figure reflected in the gentle glow of the flames, her presence a reminder of quiet resilience and courage. "You will be safe," he said, speaking more to himself than to her, though she heard him. "I can see that." Ayita nodded, her eyes steady. "Yes," she said, "and I will remember today. I will remember the kindness you showed." Eli spurred his horse gently, moving toward the path that would take him onward. He turned briefly, catching her gaze one last time. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange there was understanding, respect, and a shared acknowledgement of the fleeting yet meaningful encounter they had shared. No words could fully express it, and none were needed. The plains stretched endlessly ahead, bathed in the silver light of the moon. Eli rode slowly, savoring the memory of the river, the fire, and the quiet strength of the woman he had met. Each step of his horse carried him forward, yet his mind lingered on the day's lessons. That resilience often appears in quiet ways. That kindness, even brief, can make a lasting impact, and that human connection, no matter how fleeting, leaves its mark. As he moved along the trail, Eli thought back to the first moment he had spotted Ayita by the river. He remembered the torn dress, the careful washing, and the quiet determination in her posture. He realized that the torn fabric had been a symbol, not of weakness, but of survival. It had told him more about her than words could, and it had sparked a journey of understanding, trust, and shared stories that neither would forget. Meanwhile, Ayita sat by the fire, feeling the warmth seep into her bones as the night deepened. She reflected on the cowboy who had approached her with respect and patience, someone who had chosen to notice her rather than pass by. It was a rare gift in her life, a reminder that even in the wild, even in isolation, there were moments of understanding and humanity. She folded the last of her laundry and leaned back, gazing at the stars above. For a long while, neither moved. The fire crackled, the river flowed, and the stars blinked silently above. It was a moment suspended in time, a pause that carried meaning far beyond the day's events. Each had been touched by the other's presence. Each had seen the strength and resilience that life in the wilderness demanded, and each had been reminded of the importance of quiet connection. As the hours passed, Ayita prepared her small camp for sleep, careful to leave the fire smoldering just enough to ward off the chill. She lay back on the soft earth, listening to the gentle sounds of the night, and thought about the cowboy, the river, and the stories they had shared. She realized that even though their paths would likely diverge, the encounter had left a lasting impression. a reminder that kindness, respect, and attention to others could create bonds that endured far longer than the moment itself. Eli, riding under the pale light of the moon, felt a similar reflection. He had been traveling alone for so long, accustomed to solitude and the challenges of the trail. Yet meeting Aida had reminded him of the rare beauty in human connection, of the lessons learned from observing and listening, and of the quiet strength people carry with them, often unnoticed by the rest of the world. He knew that he would carry the memory of this encounter with him, shaping the way he viewed his journey and the people he might meet along the way. In the days and weeks that followed, the memory of the river, the fire, and the shared stories stayed with both of them. Eli thought back to the careful way Aida had handled her chores, the strength and patience evident in every movement, and the way she had welcomed him into her world, if only briefly. Aida remembered his respect, his patience, and his willingness to notice someone in need without judgment or intrusion. The plains continued to stretch endlessly, offering new challenges, new paths, and new encounters. Yet both Eli and Aida carried with them the quiet reminder that human connection, even fleeting, could illuminate the path, provide warmth in cold nights, and remind travelers of the strength and courage inherent in themselves and others. And so, as the river flowed quietly beneath the moon, and the fire cast its last warm glow on the riverbank, the story of their meeting remained, a story of respect, resilience, and shared humanity. A cowboy had noticed a woman by the river. A torn dress had stopped him cold, and in that brief encounter both had learned something lasting about strength, kindness, and the quiet power of connection. The plains, vast and eternal, held the memory of that day, and the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it a promise that even in the most lonely or challenging corners of the world, moments of understanding and trust could occur, shaping the lives of those who dared to notice, to respect, and to connect. And as the stars wheeled overhead, Eli rode on, and Aida remained by the river, both carrying the memory of a day that had changed them quietly but profoundly, a day when a chance encounter became a story neither would ever forget.